The editor's email arrived at 11:14 on a Tuesday night, which was already a bad sign. Marcus Wayne had learned in 6 years of doing this kind of work that nothing good ever came in after 11. Good assignments came at 9 in the morning with a coffee mug nearby and a reasonable deadline. The ones that arrived late at night, phrased carefully, asking him specifically, those were the ones that left marks. He read it twice. A hotel in the old part of Kolkata, the Alderton Grand. Once a colonial era jewel, now the kind of place that survived on reputation and the particular stubbornness of its British Indian owner, a man named Dash Prakash, who reportedly refused every development offer that came this way. One room permanently sealed, third floor, end of the east corridor, room 307. The editor wanted a piece for the magazine's October issue, something atmospheric. She wrote, "The mystery of a locked room, the rumors, maybe lock into the history." Nothing pressuring, light journalism, the kind of thing Marcus could do in 2 days and write in one long afternoon sitting. He booked the train ticket the same night, before he could think too hard about it. Kolkata in September smelled exactly the way he remembered from childhood visits of his aunt. Wet stone, marigold garlands, diesel, something frying in mustard oil somewhere just out of sight. He arrived in late afternoon, when the sky above Park Street had turned the color of old brass. The Alderton sat back from the road behind a low iron gate, its facade pale yellow with dark water stains tracing long vertical lines from each window, like dried tears. The lobby was cool and dim. Ceiling fans moved the air in slow circles. A young man at the desk, barely 20, with a name badge reading Rohan, gave Marcus his keys without any particular ceremony. Third floor, room 312, eastern corridor. "Is the room 307 nearby?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice casual. Rohan's fingers paused over the keyboard. Not a dramatic pause, just a small, human hesitation. The kind a person makes when they decide in real time how honest they want to be. "Yes, sir, down the hall from yours." "Has it been sealed long?" Another pause, shorter. "Since before I started working here." He handed over the key card without meeting Marcus' eyes. "Breakfast is between 7 and 10 if you need anything." "I'll manage," Marcus said, and picked up his bag. The eastern corridor on the third floor was narrower than the main hall, with a lower ceiling and wallpaper that had once been creamed with a delicate floral pattern, and now just cream and brown, faded evenly the way old things fade when nothing touches them for years. Room 312 was comfortable enough. A good bed, clean linen, a window that looked down into a small inner courtyard where a single tree grew in a cracked stone planter. Room 307 was at the far end. He walked past it that first evening just to look. The door was identical to all the others in the corridor. Dark wood, tarnished brass numbers, a small keyhole that had been covered on outside with what looked like a strip of black electric tape, slightly peeled at one corner. Someone had placed a small clay figure of Kalima on the floor just outside the threshold. She was old, the paint chipped off her feet, but the marigold garland around her neck was fresh. Someone was still leaving offerings.
"Guests who ask about the room are always journalists,"
Dash Prakash told him the next morning, sitting down with his tea.
"Or they think they are brave." "They are probably both."
The owner was a compact man in his late 60s, with white hair worn long and eyes that watched things with a stillness that Marcus found slightly unnerving. He sat in a small office behind the front desk, surrounded by ledgers and a framed photograph of hotel as it had looked in 1947. tall and unbroken against a clear sky. "I'm not trying to be brave," Marcus said. "I just want to understand what happened."
Understanding,
Dash Prakash said.
is not always available.
He picked up his tea again.
A woman died in that room in 1962. Her name was Priya Anand. She was 26, a music teacher visiting from Bombay. She had been staying here for 10 days.
He paused.
She was found in the morning. The door was locked from the inside and the windows were latched.
"And the cause of death?" He set his cup down very carefully.
The official record says cardiac arrest.
But the ceiling fan turned. Outside, a crow called once and went down.
There were marks on her throat.
Dash Prakash said.
Two of them. Very precise. The attending doctor in 1962 was a man named Banerjee, who wrote the cardiac arrest report and then retired the following week after 30 years of practice. He moved to a village outside Darjeeling and did not practice again.
He met Marcus' eyes for the first time in the conversation.
Make of that what you will.
Marcus had been in enough old buildings to know that stories clung to them the way smell clung to the fabric. He couldn't always see it, but it was always there. He had written about a collapsed factory in Ahmedabad where workers swore they still heard the looms, a village in Rajasthan where a well had been sealed for generations because of what people said lived in the water. He was skeptic by training, a journalist by profession, and a person who was nothing less careful about the things he dismissed out of hand. He started with the hotel ledger, which Dash Prakash allowed him to examine in the office, with one condition. Nothing was to be photographed. Marcus agreed, borrowed a legal pad and began copying entries by hand. Priya Anand had checked into room 307 on the 4th of March, 1962. Her check-in record was ordinary. Name, city of origin, profession listed as music teacher. She had paid for 14 days in advance, which was slightly unusual. She had listed no next of kin in the guest ledger, which was the practice at that time. She was found dead on the morning of 14th, 10 days into her stay. Marcus turned pages, working backwards, and then stopped. The guest who occupied room 307 in the week before Priya's arrival was listed simply as V. Mercescu, Romanian, independent. He had stayed 3 nights. His checkout was noted as normal. His entry in the ledger was written in slightly different ink than the surrounding entries, darker, as if added later, or as if whoever wrote it had pressed harder than necessary. Marcus wrote the name down. He turned more pages. V. Mercescu had also stayed at the Alderton in 1948. Same room, same notation. Romanian, independent. 3 nights. I found the name again in 1931. Again in 1919. 4 visits across 40 years. Always the same room. Always 3 nights. Always checked out normally. He sat back in the chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. The arithmetic was not comfortable. A guest who visited in 1919 should by 1962 be at minimum in his 70s. The ledger gave no age. The handwriting in each entry, when Marcus compared them side by side on the page, was identical. He went back to 307 that evening after dinner. The corridor was empty. The overhead lights doing their inadequate work against the dark. He stood outside the door for a while, not doing anything dramatic. Just standing there, the way you stand outside a place that makes you a little uncertain, Then he noticed the tape over the keyhole was hanging loose at the bottom. Not by much, maybe a centimeter, but it had been fully adhered that morning. He was sure of it. He crouched and looked through the keyhole and saw only black, the inside, lightless and sealed. But he could smell it, very faintly. Old paper, wool, something floral that didn't belong to the corridor's damp stone smell, something that might have been perfume, old perfume, the kind worn in a different decade entirely. He stood up, and as he did, from inside the room, he heard it. Not crying exactly, more like the tail end of crying. That particular quality of breathing someone has when they have been sobbing for a long time and have nearly run out of energy for it. Short, exhausted in text. A person reduced to their smallest sound. A woman. He put his hand on the door handle. Before he could decide whether to, it turned. Not fully. It caught. Held. But it moved in his hand, the mechanism inside giving the small mechanical click of a lock that was not in that moment, entirely committed to being locked. Then it stopped, solid, unmovable. He stood there with his hand on the door handle for what felt like a long time. The sound inside had gone quiet. The corridor was empty. Down at the far end, the elevator hummed softly behind its grating, going somewhere or coming from somewhere. It was impossible to tell. Marcus went back to his room and sat on the bed and wrote everything down while his hand was still steady enough to write. He called his editor the next morning and told her he needed 2 more days. She didn't ask why, which meant she either trusted him or was nervous about what he might be finding, and he didn't want to examine which of those things it was. The door at 307 was locked again in the morning. Tape, readhered, flat over the keyhole. Fresh marigolds at the base of the Kali figure. Marcus asked Rohan at the desk who changed the flowers, and Rohan said, very quietly, that he did it himself, first thing every morning, because his grandmother had told him that to stop would be worse than to continue. He offered no further explanations, and Marcus didn't push for one. He spent the afternoon at the State Archives, a building on a side street near Dalhousie Square that smelled heavily of old paper and institutional floor polish. A helpful archivist named Sujata found him the death register from March 1962. Without too much trouble, Priya Anand, female, age 26, cause of death, cardiac arrest. Attending physician, Dr. P.K. Banerjee, filed at March 15, 1962. Is there a police record? Marcus asked. Sujata checked. There was not, or rather, there had been an initial incident report filed by the hotel, which was procedure, but it had been closed the same day with a note in faded pencil. No evidence of criminal act. Medical matter. Can I see the incident report? She bought it. It was a single paper, pre-printed with blank fields, mostly filled in with standard information, except at the bottom, in the section for additional notes, someone had written and then crossed out a single line. The crossing out was heavy, multiple strokes, clearly deliberate. Marcus tilted the page in the light until he could just make out what had been written beneath the ink. 2 puncture wounds, right side of the neck, consistent with. The rest was unreadable. Whatever word had followed consistent with was gone entirely. He drove back to the hotel as the evening was coming in grey and low over the city, rain starting its unusual business of turning every surface to a mirror. He was thinking about the ledger, about the Romanian man who visited every decade and never seemed to age between visits, about a young woman who had died with marks on her throats, in a room locked from the inside, and a doctor who had retired immediately afterwards, and a police report that had been very carefully edited. He was thinking about all this and not paying attention that the door to the room 307, as he passed it in the corridor, was standing open. Not wide open, just slightly ajar, a centimeter of darkness visible at the edge. He pushed it open with 2 fingers, the way you push a door when you already know you shouldn't. The room inside was not empty, not the way a sealed room should be empty. There was a bed, neatly made, with a white coverlet that had the particular look of hotel linen from decades ago, starched into a kind of rigidity that modern fabrics didn't achieve. A writing desk against the wall, an armchair near the window. On the desk, an open notebook, a pen placed across it as though someone had just set it down and stepped away. On the floor near the wardrobe, a small brown leather suitcase, initialed in a gold leaf, slightly flanked P.A. And on the beside table, a second case, larger, dark, with iron clasps gone rust brown at the corners. No initials, but a strange smell emanating from it. Earth and something cold beneath the earth. The smell of the side of a very old place. The smell of the inside of a very old place that had not been opened in a long time. The window was latched shut. The room was perfectly still. Marcus stood in the doorway. He did not go in. Some correct instinct, older than his training or his skepticism, held him at the threshold. The light in the room was wrong. Not darkness, but a quality of dimness that didn't correspond to any available light source, as though the room was generating its own particular version of evening. He looked at the notebook on the desk. From where he stood, he could see it was filled with handwriting, both pages visibly covered, edge to edge. He could make out a few phrases at this distance. He comes at 3 in the morning, and the log does not matter to him, and what looked like, I think, he has been in his room before, in another time, and I think he will be again. The door swung slowly, closed between them. Not violent, quietly, the way a door closes when a window somewhere has been opened and there is a change in the air pressure of a building. The latch clicked. The corridor was empty. Down the hall, in room 312, Marcus' own door was exactly where he had left it. He left the next morning before breakfast. He didn't speak to Das Prakash. He didn't tell Rohan. He settled his bill with the night staff, a quiet woman who processed his checkout without a comment, and he walked out to the iron gate as the city was just beginning its noise for the day. On the train home, he wrote 3,000 words. They came out clearly, in one sustained effort, the way good work sometimes came when a person had genuinely experienced what they were describing. He filed the piece that same evening. His editor replied within an hour. "This is excellent. Exactly what we wanted. One thing, you have written yourself into the ending, the bit about standing in the doorway. Do you want to cut that or keep it?" He replied that she should keep it. 3 weeks later, the piece ran. It did well. He moved on to another assignments. He thought about the room occasionally, the way you think about a vivid dream, with decreasing frequency and increasing uncertainty about that specific detail. 3 months after his visit, he received a letter, no written address. Inside was a single page, a photocopy of a hotel ledger entry. The Alderton Grand. The current year, room 307, which Marcus knew was sealed and had been sealed since 1962. The entry read, When M. Calcutta journalist. Check-in, March 4th, room 307. Long-term resident. The check-in date was the same as Priya Anand's. The handwriting, he had seen it before, in 4 ledger entries, spanning 4 decades. It was the same. He sat with the letter for a long time. Outside his window, his city went about its evening. He thought about a Romanian man who visited every decade and left no trace but a name and a room number and 2 small marks. Thought about the notebook on the desk, the pages covered edge to edge, the sentence he had read clearly from the doorway. I think he will come again. Then he folded the letter, put it in his desk drawer, and didn't take it out again. Not that night anyway.